March this Tuesday as we join you on radio.com as we get through another day. Actually, an update on the market. The market's actually responded today, I think more because of the fact that there was some crunch and some worry in the credit markets. So the government started to produce some cash that would be there and be available for these companies that are going to be needing it. And most companies are going to be needing some stimulus. There's no question. And a lot of them, some industries enormously, like the airlines, the travel business, hotels, etc., especially the airlines. And there's been a little bit of a fear and anxiety, let's say, in the credit markets more than anything else, which will trickle into the regular equity market. But today the market went up, I think, more probably because Amazon is doing a lot of business, and I think they bounced off that a little bit, and so the market actually had a good day. But it had such a bad day yesterday, record-breaking day yesterday, that you knew it would bounce back some. It'll really be interesting to see if it holds some gains over the next couple of days. That would be a better indicator of anything else, and that you're back into a market that's got some plus and minus to it rather than just straight down. The next 3 days will tell you. If the next 3 days can close up from here, I think that would be a positive step moving to next week, that we've at least found a base to go forward in, and it's not just a straight, falling knife, which it's been the last couple of days. Even though Amazon did hold its lead, its gains today. He had reason to. I mean, they're doing an incredible amount of business, as you would expect. People are getting toys and school supplies and all kinds of cleaning aids and everything else sent by Amazon because they don't want to go out. So Amazon's business has been unbelievable. It's been up they needed to hire another 100,000 people. So clearly they are going to be one of the beneficiaries of this. There's other companies that will be too, but they clearly will be. A lot of companies will not, though. A lot of companies are going to get hurt very badly in the next couple of months as this goes forward. But it's very hard to know where we are yet. As the testing starts to roll out, we'll see in these next days whether or not this is working. There's even been talk, as you know, in the last couple of hours that New York City may be moving to a real stringent shelter where you are kind of legislation in the next 48 hours. So we'll see what happens with that. I think you can still go to work, but no real movements except far from home, except that's completely necessary. They haven't restricted flying yet. I don't know if they will get to that point where they'll restrict flying except in emergency, but I don't know how long the airlines are going to operate as we know them. It's going to be interesting to see as this unfolds. We're still learning. And remember, we're still in the early days of this. You're looking at this now. Most people are starting to take a view out to June and July at the very earliest for things to be rescheduled. So from that standpoint, we haven't even hit the last days of March yet. We're on March 17th. We have 13 days left. We have 2 weeks left in March. So, I mean, it's remarkable. It really is. It's something we've never seen before. And it's even hard to even try to predict exactly what the ramifications are going to be economically. I think they're going to be enormous. But first, we have to deal with the medical and get that under control. And hopefully we're doing that. I mean, it's very hard to tell if we are or we aren't, but, I guess the numbers and the doctors will tell us in the days to come, and the hospitals will show us in the days to come if we are doing that well. And it's right in our backyard because we always seem to lead the world in everything that's good and bad, so we obviously have the most cases. It's always us, right? Us in California leading the way in something, whether it's good or bad. And that's where we are from that standpoint. Free agency today, of course, the big story, one that you've been dealing with all day, everywhere, no matter where you've listened or what you've done or if you were working, you were talking about this. And that, of course, is the fact that Tom Brady has told the world that he is leaving the Pats. You waited for that meeting with Kraft. You knew Belichick would take this from a very pragmatic position. What we didn't know, and what someone who's been around them a long time or knows how the dynamics have worked there a long time knew, was that you were going to get that Kraft Brady meeting. And a lot of us, and I did too, knowing Kraft a very long time, that it was going to be hard for Kraft to say goodbye. And if Tom had showed a reasonably workable inkling that he wanted to come back, even being pliable a little bit with the money and wanting to show that he wanted to come back, it was very hard to believe that Kraft wouldn't find a way to make that happen, even if Belichick did want him to go. And I'm sure Belichick wants to move on because quarterbacks, coaches want to move on. That's the way coaches are. Coaches can't be sentimental. They really can't be. And I think he would rather go forward with the prototype of the new quarterback. And then, let's be honest, one thing that has changed dramatically, and I'll admit that I've even been slow to coming around to it, but the evidence is so overwhelming now, is your quarterback now, because of the way that the dynamic is working between the offensive and defensive lines and the way they are teaching offensive linemen now, you have got to have mobility at the quarterback position. You don't have to be a plus runner down the field, but you have to have escapability. You have to have slide and throw talents. You have to be able to buy time. And the prototypical guy that we know, who has been the prototypical pocket guy, is now at a loss because offensive lines are not doing the same job that they did. They're doing a different job now. They're blocking differently than they used to. And the quarterback has got to get on the run. And I go back to this, I harken back to the Super Bowl this year. If you would put a number of very talented quarterbacks in the Kansas City backfield that day, and forget how smart they were, forget how tough they were, forget how good their arm was, if you did not give them the escapability, the maneuverability and escapability that Mahomes had, they would have been swallowed in that game by the San Francisco pass rush. If you put a Manning in that game, if you put a Brady in that game, I could put 20 other quarterbacks in that game, all very talented guys who could throw the ball with anybody. But if you put them in that game, they would have been sacked 10 times. And the game would have been lost because San Francisco was that dominant in their pass rush. This guy got away from so many negative plays and was able to make so many plays on the run and so many plays after he didn't go down that it changed the game, dramatically changed the game. And that has become a very, very, as big as accuracy is to quarterbacks, the ability to move and throw has become just as important in the modern quarterback for the variety of reasons that I just gave you. And that's the way that these guys want to run these offenses now. They want to tie that into the offense, that the quarterback has a running quotient and a maneuverability and a slide and throw capability that he brings to the game. And now we wait to see where Brady goes. Everything we're led to believe is, unless there's some sleeper team, which would have to be the Dolphins, and I doubt it, or the Raiders, and I doubt it. But it looks like it's a battle between the Bucs and the Chargers, with the Bucs maybe a slight favorite. But I tweeted this earlier, and it's really how I feel. The next stop for Tom should be Canton. The next move for him should be to Canton. That's the best thing that could happen to him. Odds are he's not going to find what he's looking for out there, because he has been such a creature of the culture that he was brought into and learned to thrive in. And it is a culture that is extremely atypical of this current NFL. He is not going to find players as studious as the ones he was around. He is not going to find players as dedicated and as versatile as the ones he was around because the Pats have created that culture. The Pats do not tolerate people who don't understand the playbook, who don't understand what they want to do, who don't have versatility and toughness and brain power. They do not tolerate players who don't do that. Brady has gotten very used to that. Yes, he was miffed this past year that they didn't put weapons around him, and they didn't. They didn't do a good job. They didn't adequately replace Gronkowski. They didn't make good moves at the wide receiver position. They tried to make a move on Brown. It didn't work. So they wound up with no weapons, and it cost Tom dearly last year. Has he slipped? Yeah, of course he slipped. He's going to be 43. Of course he slipped. He's not 30 years old. He's not the same player anymore. I mean, let's be honest. Tom's not 28 or 30. He's going into his mid-40s. He's not the same player. Last year, there were many times, and Belichick, of course, let everybody know this, that there were many times in November and later that Tom wasn't available for practice because he was banged up. But that's because of his age. You don't respond from hits the same way. You don't bounce back the same way. Your body doesn't heal the same way. There is a far greater chance that Belichick will have some success or more success than Brady will. Because of the fact that while Brady can go to a team that has weapons, he cannot replace the culture. The defense will not respond the same way. They will not be coached the same way. They will not be the same culture that he's had around him. And it's unlikely, I think it's unlikely that either one wins a Super Bowl while they're both still coaching and playing together. So Belichick could hang around long enough to win another one. Tom's only got a couple of years left. In that time, I doubt very much that either of them will win a Super Bowl apart. But I could see the Pats with Belichick having more success than Tom has where he goes. I think it's more a 50-50 bet as to whether Tom would take the team to the playoffs next year versus whether he would take them to the Super Bowl. And I think he will probably, in most scenarios, be disappointed with what happens because he's getting older. And the odds on him finding that right special place is very unlikely. And if he had listened to someone like Joe Montana who went out and did that, you heard him say, stay where you are. You'll wish you stayed where you are. And rarely do guys move and find a scenario that is good to them. Yes, Peyton Manning did. He walked into a situation where there was a terrific defense and he was able to win a Super Bowl when he was not the same player. That is true. He's the one guy who did that. Odds on that happening are very, very rare. And the teams Tom's talking to are not teams that are ready to win. None of them. The one that was ready to win wasn't looking to bring him in. They were using Tom to get a better deal with Tannehill. Tom was using them to create more of a market for himself, and they were using Tom to get a better deal with Tannehill, who they wanted to re-sign from the get-go. All right, we've had a lot of movement here with obviously Brady. We'll wait another day, or maybe sometime tonight he'll want to tell us. Who knows? I don't know when he's going to tell us, but let's say he'll tell us in the next 24 hours or so where he's going. Sounds like retirement is not a possibility. I wish for him that it was. He has nothing more to prove. He doesn't need to play any more games. That he wants to play more games is clearly his choice and his prerogative, and God bless him. I wish him well. I just don't expect big things. Rivers gets a one-year deal with the Colts, which we've talked about forever because he has obviously a relationship there. Bridgewater is now in Carolina where he's pushed Cam Newton out the door. Cam Newton's unhappy. He's out the door. Cam Newton's going to have a hard time finding a job. Drew Brees gets a 2-year deal to go back. He might not be that happy afterwards either because Sean really, really has other ideas for the position. So it's going to be interesting to see where there he gets a 2-year, $50 million deal there. So Bridgewater goes to Carolina. You have, obviously, Rivers goes to Indianapolis. Cam's on the move looking for a new team. Does Chicago take a nibble? Who knows? There's going to be other guys moving. Do the Pats look for a new guy, or do they go with Stidham at quarterback? He's only thrown a couple of passes in his life, and one was a pick six, as we know, that covered the point spread for the Jets, or gave the Jets a chance to cover the point spread in that dreadful game against the Pats. And Breeze comes back, and we wait to see where Tom goes. The tight end's on the move. Austin Hooper's a good player. Goes to the Browns, 4 for 42. Witten goes to the Raiders. I love Witten. I loved Witten from the day he was in college. I was a big fan of his when he was in college. Loved him as a pro. Thought he was going to be a top player when he was in college. Loved him every day he was a Cowboy. He's done. I know he wanted to come back and wipe away the fact that he didn't do a good job as a broadcaster, which he didn't. But he's a Hall of Fame tight end. And I just hope he doesn't get hurt this year because he did not look like the same player last year. And now he goes to the Raiders. Listen, he's a Hall of Famer. Absolute lock Hall of Famer. He's an all-time great tight end. He's been a wonderful player, but it's over. But you know what? Everybody gets the right to hang around if they want to. You know, that's part of the deal. You get to do that. Vic Beasley to the Titans, and more and more and more. We'll get to the Jets and Giants, what they're up to. And obviously, there's still more to come, and everyone's still waiting with bated breath for what Tom's going to do. We got a lot of other stuff going on today. Obviously, you know that 4 Nets tested positive for the virus. I guess only one has what we would call real symptoms, but 4 did test positive. We're going to hear more and more about people in every sport and every walk of life who've tested positive. It's going to get to a point where we're not even going to want to hear anymore that someone tested positive. It's going to become that ordinary, that routine, that it's not even going to be a headline anymore. It's not, it's going to be, okay, don't tell us anymore about anybody else test positive. We got enough. We've heard enough. We don't need any more. And although it's been put very much on the back burner, we do have primaries tonight. Ohio is canceled, but we do have Florida, Illinois, Arizona, and most likely with a dominant showing. And he'll have a dominant showing in Florida. He'll have a dominant showing in Illinois. It'll probably be close in Arizona. He'll rack up a couple more wins, open up the delegate count. The question is, when does Bernie get out of the race and make it time to go head-to-head and concentrate on that? That's all that's left. We all know what's going to happen. Bernie wanted to stay in for that debate. Biden didn't do anything to hurt himself in that debate. He actually made the only news out of the debate when he announced that he will be picking a female as his running mate. I thought there was a good chance that he would, but now we know that he will. Will it be one of the 3 ladies that was on the stage with him? Maybe. I would think there's a chance that that's the case. I can't see him picking Elizabeth Warren. I really can't. The other 2, I think he could see him picking. I think Elizabeth Warren creates too much heat for him. I don't. She's feisty. She's got a following, but I don't think he needs her following, number 1. And number 2, I think she creates a target for him during the campaign that he doesn't want. So I would think that would not be a strong move. And I do think, hey, let's be honest, a lot of this now is going to come down to what happens with this virus, which is going to control our lives on a day to day basis for a very good part of the rest of this year. And clearly will be something we will be discussing and examining and living with right up to Election Day. So, how this unfolds will have a lot to say about who the president is. There's no way around that. It doesn't have to be fair or unfair. It doesn't matter. We all know that nobody brought this upon anybody. But how it unfolds and how the government handles it and how it turns out, if it turns out where we don't have a lot of people sick and we're back to some kind of regular life by the middle of June and everything rebounds and the economy starts to rebound and people are traveling again and summer looks kind of regular in terms of everyone living their regular summer lives. If that happens, that will be a very big positive for the president. If we are in economic and cultural chaos 90 days from now, we don't know which end is up. Sporting events haven't come back. The economy hasn't come back. Companies are going belly up. If we get that, it's going to stick to the incumbent. Doesn't matter if it's fair or unfair. It doesn't make any difference. It's fact. It's the world we live in. Presidents get things thrust on them, and how they react to them decide their presidency. This now is President Trump's. He owns this. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Do I think he, did anything to deserve this? No. Did he start it? No. Does it matter? Not a little bit. What happens now and which way this goes and whether our country comes out, without being completely torn apart and put into a, serious economic plight and with all kinds of ramifications, unemployment, just really cultural and economic chaos, that will decide things. This is going to be the biggest theme. His handling of this event is going to be the biggest theme of the rest of this year and of the campaign. Case closed. If it's going good, he'll say, hey, I did a great job. If it's going bad, Biden's going to pound them on it every day. You would too. You're running for president. That's what happens. So that's where it is. I mean, you've seen them make moves on the economic. I watch this stuff a lot. I always have, but I really, now that I have more time in my day, I watch more of it than especially in the morning, I get a chance to watch more of it than I did in the past. And, CNBC does such a great job of covering it in the morning. They have really good people in all facets of it, covering the government part of it, covering the Fed, covering every possible part of it. They do a great job with it. All their shows are really good. And clearly, there's a lot of scary parts to this. And talking to people that I know who have businesses and who employ a decent amount of people, hey, they don't have a lot of money coming in right now. I mean, everybody has been impacted. Stadiums are empty. Shopping malls are empty. Restaurants are empty. Stores you go in that are usually full are empty. I went to see my buddies at Kitchen Cabaret today, which is a place that is on a daily basis packed. For what they do, they're the best, okay? The best. And they're jammed, usually. And they told me how much care they're putting into keeping the place clean, having people wear gloves, and doing all the different things they're doing. And you could eat off the floor in a place. It was meticulous. But for that place, it was empty, absolutely empty. And no matter where you go now, nobody's doing any business. Most things are closed. You're not going out. You're not going to the movies. You're not going out to dinner. You're not doing this. You're not doing that. You're not flying. You're not going to a hotel. You're not going on an airliner. I mean, it's like the store is closed and everybody went home. And that's going to have wide ranging ramifications. There's no question about it. But the first part is we got to hope that what they're telling us, and listen, these guys you can tell. I mean, they know what they're talking about. So they understand this. And what they're doing now makes sense. I understand the testing's been slow. Okay, we can all decide why that was the case. I don't know why it was the case. And now it seems like they're getting the testing out. We need to get the people tested. We're hoarding stuff, which is crazy. I saw today where they said, hey, the medical people don't have enough surgical masks because people are buying up the surgical masks. Hey, let the people who need them, the professionals, you don't need a surgical mask. Stay home. Go to the golf course. Go for a walk. Go out in the air. Just stay away from people. You don't need a surgical mask. It's not going to help you. I mean, we have this now enormous shortage of toilet paper, which I guess we knew we would have, right? I mean, you saw the guys talking about that. Even the companies, I mean, they got to be ecstatic. I mean, they can't make it fast enough. But, I mean, think about that. What's the one product we're going to have a shortage of? Hand sanitizer and toilet paper are going to be the two things you can't get in America. You can't find hand sanitizer, you can't find toilet paper, and you can't find it in a ball game. It just shows you those of us that live with sports. It just shows you. And if it's with me, it was always about the game. See, I've never been one that was, thrilled by the great human interest story, or oh, this colorful character, or that wasn't why I got into sports. I like sports because I like the games. I like the matchups. I like the games. I like to see great players. I like to see players perform. You like to see pressure games. I like the games. And when the games aren't there, you miss them. I mean, we'd right now be getting ready. Tomorrow would be the NCAA tournament. We'd be on the eve. We'd have played through the two play-in games. We'd be getting ready for 16 basketball games tomorrow. I would be sending or having my producer, the last one would have been Mons, make sure that he had all the pizzas there, ready to go by noon, piping hot. That was a tradition I started low 30 years ago, maybe more. On the tournament Thursday, I always bought pizzas for the whole place. That would be tomorrow, 12 o'clock. Tip it off. I mean, I, for one, would love to have the tournament being played tomorrow at 12 o'clock. What are you going to do? I mean, think about it. That event, which is such a captivating event over 17 days, jam all those games. And this weekend was always special because you were going to, between Thursday and Sunday night, between Thursday at 12 and Sunday night, you were going to play 48 of these games. This tournament really was 4 days because in 4 days you were going to play 48 of the 63 games before they went to the two playing games. You used to play 48 of the 63 games in the first 4 days of the tournament. 16, 16, 8, and then 8. So you had 32 games over 4 days. And those two rounds were always classic. I mean, not that you wouldn't get a good regional final or a, classic Final Four game, but really the essence of the tournament is, what went on those first couple of days. Or those second round, 8-9 versus 1 matchups, or, the second round up to set, or whatever it might be on the weekend. Or, think of some of the classic, games that you saw be played through the years where teams got knocked out. Big teams get knocked out right before 60 minutes or, on a Saturday afternoon. Orlando Blackman, U.S. Reed, St. Joe's beating DePaul, the mighty DePaul team. I mean, so many great games that we saw during that tournament. Now, I've been watching that tournament since the days of the, mid-'60s when you used to watch it on Eddie Einhorn stuff. When you watch those syndicated games on a Thursday night or on a Saturday, watch those syndicated NCAA tournament games and watch, Jabbar or Alcindor in those days or Bill Walton, Ernie DiGregorio, go down the line. Calvin Murphy. I mean, think about all those great games, all those tournament games, and having done so many of the tournaments myself, having done the Final Four and the final game so many times. First one I did for CBS, which was the Jordan game in New Orleans, obviously, the game that launched the legacy. Still the best college basketball game I ever saw. Played at the higher level than any game I've ever seen. You miss that. You really do. But, hey, we live in this very, very strange time where every night you turn the TV on and you just hope that it didn't get that much worse today. Or that we're making progress. And maybe trying to get a little bit of an idea or a handle. I think that's what you see every day with the market as it's open, is that it's just trying to find some semblance of order. And I think that's what we're all trying to find right now. It's just some semblance of order in our lives. The NFL gave us a little of that today, at least in our neck of the woods, because it gave us something to talk about for a change, instead of talking about stuff that, A, we know nothing about, because nobody knows anything about infectious disease and viruses, and B, taking us down a road that none of us have ever been in before. I mean, you have radio stations that aren't operating like radio stations. You have no business that is operating like a normal business now because you've divided people up. You got people working from home. A lot of people think that will change America, that what we're going through right now, this ordeal, will change the way America does business daily. With the schools all on video and meetings on video, and the idea of, and I've been an investor in Teledoc and Zoom and Slack. Okay, you've heard me talk about Slack before, okay, and talk about Zoom and talk about these companies and what they produce, and and DocuSign, which you've probably used by now, which is a really smart company. I mean, that you can basically sign these things without even being there. These companies, which are New Wave and stuff like that, and everybody wanted to have a meeting with me in the last couple of days. Everything was with Zoom. We're going to have a meeting. Here's your things. Here's your codes, blah, blah, blah. I had invested in Zoom since it came out, but I had never done it until this last week. And I've used it, had people, send me things and set up meetings with me with Zoom a couple times here the last couple of days. That's what a lot of people are using right now. So will it change? Maybe it will. I can't tell. I mean, I don't know if it will or it won't. I think people, though, I think they need to get out of the house. I really don't think that will ever change. I don't know that it's healthy. I think you need to get out of the house. And, at this stage of where, I am in my broadcast career, I do broadcast from home. Once in a while broadcast from the studio, but not so much anymore. I have a studio in the house. But that's after 35 years of being in the studio every day. I still think it's important to just get out and, interact as a high school student or a, young person or in your daily life. I just think it's important to go out and do that. You don't want to be I don't think it's good that there isn't that interaction. I think that's important. And I understand right now that it's supposed to be curtailed, and there's a reason why. Especially if we believe this virus has the ability to live as it travels through the air, that it actually can live and can be passed from one person to the other through the air, which has been discussed by the World Health Organization in the last 24 hours, that the virus might have properties that allowed it to do that. They didn't think it first did, that it either had to be picked up on surfaces or it went from one person's, breathing or coughing or comes from one person's mouth and nose to another person's. But now they think might have these airborne capabilities, which makes it even a tougher opponent to defeat. And I don't know if they've completely proved that that's the case, but it sounds like they do think that it might have these properties, which is why it has been so highly contagious. And who knows? I mean, when you have kids, one comes down, they're out doing everything they do, and they come back and one's sick. And you're thinking, all right, now, does he have a fever? What does it mean? Do we have to stay away from him now? Can he give it to us? When do we know if he has something? When do we know if it goes away? So you don't know. You don't want to rush and act like it's automatically that. It probably isn't. It's a crazy time. It really is. Something we've never lived through before. I mean, this one's so different. Everyone's trying to compare it to something. 9/11, the financial crisis of 2008 and 9. But this one's different, very different. Hurricane Sandy, still very different. We understood what happened. There was a finality to what happened. You try to dig out. You try to rebuild. You do what has to be done. You repair. You get going again. You dust yourself off. You pick yourself up. This one's a little different. This one has no timetable. Has no game plan. Every day you're looking to see exactly where it went and, keep score. You see these big, virus scoreboards that look like election results, state by state, city by city, number of cases, fatalities, country, this, that. It's kind of like you're watching a primary. Very bizarre. Really is. But that's how we judge things. That's how we analyze things. We keep score. But we also want to understand that here's the opponent. Here's the game plan to beat the opponent. Here's the start. Here's the middle. Here's the end. We don't know what the start is. We don't know where the middle is. We don't know where the end is. And when you had the president come out last night and say, well, I think we could be coming out of this by August. I'm like, oh, well, August? Did he say August? Think about it. It's March. August. Sounds, they'll be peeling everybody off the walls by then. August. The one thing we expect is the golf games to improve this year. Okay? Because if you got time on your hands, you know what? There's plenty of courses. You can go out there, hit a public course, get your hours in, get out in the fresh air. So Everybody's golf game's got to be vastly improved by what goes on here this spring. That's one of the things that it has to be a residual of this. There might not be a lot of things you take from it that are positive. You know, your portfolio might not look too good. You know, work might not be a lot of fun. You might have spent too many days in the house, but the golf game should be improved. Back after this. If you are someone who estimates your taxes all year, you know that if you deal with the government every year for a long time, you can't wait a whole year and be behind the whole year with them because they'll pound you if you do that. You have to give them estimated tax along the way. So you've usually paid in most of the money. You might owe them a little money. You might owe them some capital gains money if it's cashed in something where you sold a house or sold some stock or something like that. You might owe them some money from that standpoint. But really, you've paid them along the way because you have to. You know, you have to make estimated tax payments. It's not like you get to wait the whole year to pay them the money. You know, you don't get to hold the money the whole year. It's just the way it works. So, but if you are someone who owes and it bums you out to give them money on April 15th, now you're going to get an extra 90 days. So you're not going to have to pay your income tax bill. So if you are going to get money back, you're going to file early and get your refund. And if you owe the money, you now can wait 90 days. So May, June, July, 15th, you can wait to pay them the money you owe them. So you get to play around for another 90 days as part of this, which is, all right, it's something. You know, Mitt Romney came up with an idea of giving everybody $1,000 to spend. There's going to be some ways to help people out who are going to be, what you worry about here is you worry about businesses that are both large and small that just are not doing any business and cannot afford to pay everybody. I mean, that's the problem. If you have a restaurant and you have X number of employees and you can't open your door for a month or 2 months, it's hard to pay everybody every day. Same thing with any business. I mean, no matter what size it is, if you're not doing any business, it's very tough to do. Now, some of these big businesses have money and balance sheets and some money they can deal with. Okay, good for them. And you hope that they take care of their workers. Hopefully they will. But this is going to be tricky. I mean, it really is because so many businesses are. I couldn't think that there's a business out there. Now, can I find a couple of businesses that are doing better? I'm sure I could. I'm sure there's a diagnostic center that's doing better. I'm sure there's going to be a biotech that is going to make some inroads with a new drug that's going to do well. I'm sure I can think of a couple of, I mean, Amazon as one is seeing an uptick in business. I'm sure the grocery stores are doing very well because I'm sure Costco, I've never been in a Costco, but I'm sure Costco is doing very well in that they probably can't keep the stuff on the shelves fast enough. And they're probably selling out, you know, and restocking and selling out faster than they ever did. So I'm sure from that standpoint, there's some people that are doing a little better during this crisis, but there's so many people who are, you know, in so many industries that have just been stopped cold. And I saw the other day at the hotel, in the hotels, they talked about their business being down 91%. And what the boys just came in to tell me was that they wanted me to know what I already knew, I just hadn't gotten to it yet, was that Durant was one of the Nets who tested positive. Again, at his age and his health, that means nothing. Do you know in Italy, where they are having a very, very high percentage of deaths to cases, a startlingly high number, they have not had, as of last night, they had not had one death from a person under the age of 35. Not one. What they have in Italy is two things, according to the scientists who have talked about it. Number one, the elderly people there live in the family home at very advanced ages. They don't go to nursing homes. They live in the home. So if they're getting sick right now, they're not doing well because they are in a very advanced age and a fragile state, and they live at home. Number two, there is a tremendous amount of smoking that goes on there. So there is a very high incidence of lung disease and emphysema and stuff like that. And those people who are getting stricken with that are getting hit hard by this virus, which is why their numbers were not doing very well, according to the scientists who were making trying to put a reason why their numbers were so starkly, so much more severe in terms of percentage than anyone else's were, where they were losing such a high number of people who got the disease where other countries were not. And those were the reasons they gave more than anything else. Smoking was one, and then the fact that they did house many of these elderly people in the home, in the family home. So you got 90-something-year-old people living in your home, and the virus goes through the house. That's not good. Not going to do well. So obviously, that's why quarantining nursing homes and places like that have got to be, which that we've done and everyone has done from the very, very beginning. Because that obviously is the population that cannot get hit here. If you're a young person and normally healthy, not even exceptionally healthy, normally healthy, you're going to be fine here. If you get it, you're going to do just fine. So do not fear from that standpoint. That is not going to happen. That doesn't mean there isn't one person who's going to, that's life. That can happen that way. But for the most part, statistically speaking, it is not going to be the case. So you wouldn't worry about any of the NBA guys. You would not worry about a Durant in any way. And Durant did. Was one of the four Nets, as I said, opening the show, to test positive. Now, we're going to reach a point here very, very soon where no one's going to care who. There are going to be so many different celebrities, so many different athletes, so many different people who test positive that you're not even going to care anymore. It's going to become old hat. And that, I guess, would be one step in the right direction. Because as we go through this, anything that becomes more normal, how we think about dealing with this, how we think about, the fact that you're going to know people who have been stricken with it. And again, we're not dealing with, the plague here. We're dealing with the flu. It might be a more severe case. We're still studying that, and it sounds like it may be. But this is something that most people are going to do very, very well with if they get it. You do want to make sure, though, that if you have somebody who is older, and I'm talking about, 80-ish, older. Yes, you get to a point when you're in your 60s that you don't think 80 is old anymore, or you don't even think 60 is old anymore. That's true. I don't. It's amazing, but it's true. When you're a kid, you think 60 is like 150 years old, but you don't think that anymore. What are you going to do? Hey, when you get to 60, you're not going to think you're old, I promise you. You're just not. And you're not. You don't, it's not anymore. We're all living, knock on wood, very, very long, productive lives. And hopefully that, remains the case, especially after this thing leaves us. I was thinking about this, looking to try and come up with something positive. We could have a absolutely crazy mid to late August through October, jammed with more sports than we know what to do with. Where I'm talking about having the Kentucky Derby contested in the fall, and the Masters and the U.S. Open contested in the fall, and having playoffs in sports that have to be decided this year, the winter sports decided as it comes to late summer and towards September. And obviously so many different things that we could put off that we could do in August or September. Let's take the four majors in golf. You could have them July at the earliest, but July or August, and then into September, October, and have four of them in 3 months over that period of time. You can have the Belmont Stakes run at Saratoga this one year, and then have the Preakness and the Derby running in inverse order, with the Derby being the last of the three rather than the first of the three, and have it run over Labor Day weekend. U.S. Open, same thing. Masters, run the four majors, get them out of the way. Have the British Open in August, and then click the other three off, one after another after another. You're going to have the Masters and the Kentucky Derby on the same weekend. You could jam in some winter sport playoff activity in a very short amount of time. I mean, the regular season for those sports is gone. You know that. You know that. There's no way they can do anything with that now. What you'd have to do is come back, put together some kind of training camp. You could, if you wanted to, if you thought it was some way equitable, play the last couple of days of the schedule just to use that as tune-ups and to give teams a chance that were very close to edge their way in and use those periods. But then you're also bringing all the teams back, and you might not want to bring back the teams that aren't going to qualify for the playoffs, because there's no reason for them to get back in shape and play again this year, since they'll only be doing it for a very short order. So that might not make sense from that standpoint. So even if you just come up to it off a training camp or a short, 7 to 10 day training camp to get ready for the postseason, and then just went into the postseason in those sports, it would be incredibly exciting. And yeah, you'd have to work yourself into shape over a period of time, and maybe you start the playoffs and you're not in the greatest shape as a team, but you know what? Maybe it'll just skew the results a little bit to make it a little more exciting. Unfortunately, you can't do anything with basketball for the NCAA tournament. That can't be done. That's gone. That's gone. There's no way around it. And there are other events that fall into that, column where they just can't be retrieved. But there are plenty of big name, major classic events that we wait all year for that we can still play should we be able to get something cleared by a reasonable amount of time. So while we're going through all this now, it could lead to some really unusual but some very interesting and highly entertaining times in the late summer, early fall. It could be a very different year, one that we've never experienced, but one that could be jam-packed in a very exciting way. Just as you go through that now, and you tick off the days, and you deal with all the stuff, whether you're going to have a job tomorrow or worse than that, and hopefully everyone gets the help they need. And I hope we're all generous in the ways we need to be generous for those who don't have the ability to help themselves. Looking on the old people who you know, or elderly people who you know, make sure everything's working. Make sure, they got food. If you know someone in that neighborhood, just check on them, This time, you got a little extra time, so, walk around the neighborhood, see what's going on. If you live in a neighborhood that's a condition, some neighborhoods yes, some neighborhoods no. I know every neighborhood's different. But just an idea. When we come back, we'll be joined by the fan as we approach 6.
To the sports any way that he can. It's Mike Francesa on the fan. Sports Radio 66 and 101.9 FM WFAN.
All right, we come to you on this St. Patrick's Tuesday. A happy St. Patrick's Day to everybody on this Tuesday, the 17th day of March. Brought to you by Casamigos Tequila. Brought to you by those who drink it on this day that is usually a very big day and a very raucous day everywhere, but especially in New York City. Parades, the bars always overflowing. Always a special day, but a very different one this year, obviously, a very quiet one throughout the metropolitan area and throughout the nation as we continue to go through the daily grind of what we're going through right now. We did learn, as we discussed earlier, if you were listening on radio.com, that four Nets have the virus, and soon I don't think we'll spend much time on who has it because it'll just become very commonplace. You know, when first it was in those couple of minutes where we got the news, and so much turned in that hour where the NBA decreed that it was going to shut down. And like I said before, Adam Silver is always at the forefront of these things. But that decision, and then right after that, they reported that Hanks had it, and then it was almost like this stunning news, and it was almost like right there, all of a sudden everybody started if someone hadn't taken this seriously, and you understand why people don't take things seriously. It's in China, it's across the globe, it's not here. It's not coming here. It's not going to happen. It's like that, that hurricane that doesn't show up and then it does, or that big storm that doesn't show up and then it does, and then it's not supposed to snow but then it does. And it's funny. I compare it a little bit to when I was a kid growing up in where I lived in Long Beach or East Atlantic Beach, which is right at the tip between right between where Atlantic Beach is and Long Beach is a little town called East Atlantic Beach, and they would always come and tell us to evacuate. Right, and I lived feet from the water. I grew up feet from the U.S. From the Atlantic Ocean. I mean, Atlantic Ocean was my backyard. I spent my time in the water since I was, it's all I know. And I'd known the water since before I knew anything else. So you felt pretty healthy about the water, and you didn't have a lot of fear of the ocean. And they tell you to leave. The storm's going to be ominous, going to be this, going to be that. And it used to be almost a running gag, especially when we were younger, when we were teenagers, and, of course, we knew everything. But we used to take chairs and go down, sit on the beach, wait for the storm to come. Nothing would come. We'd laugh it off. Tell us to evacuate, never would. So when they used to come around there and tell everybody in the neighborhood to evacuate, it was almost like a running gag. Nobody evacuated. Must have happened 10 to 20 times. No one ever evacuated. Until the time when no one evacuated and we got hit with the storm, the perfect storm. And then next thing you know, people wish they evacuated. It's the same thing here. It's that you think, it's going to pass. It's not going to be that bad. It's going to, come on, everyone's making it. That's how you always think of things. And it's human nature to do that. And then this one hits with such a force to where there were those couple of hours that night where the NBA shut down. They announced about Hanks and his wife. And then all of a sudden, life hasn't been the same. And it's just been one thing after another, after the next announcement, after the next announcement, to where now, they're still even talking about, more drastic steps in terms of limiting your access to movement, limiting your access to leaving home, stuff like that may be in the offing in the near future, especially since our state has, a very, very high number. I heard it said today that there was one state that didn't have any, which was West Virginia. I don't know if that's true or not. I looked on the map the other day, and the only state that didn't have one that I noticed was Utah. I might have missed West Virginia. But I was looking at the CDC map, and it looked like everyone had some, except I thought Utah, but I guess I heard last night the president say West Virginia didn't have any. So maybe they didn't do any testing yet. Who knows? I'm sure they'll have one soon. But we obviously have moved to the forefront here. I know that New Rochelle has been considered an epicenter from the beginning, and I hope the people in that area are doing fine. Uh, but it has just kind of gone from where, oh yeah, we'll deal with it. If it gets here, yeah, we'll deal with it. It's not to where it has just completely just stopped our lives to a point like we have never seen before. And I mentioned yesterday the things that have going through the years, the things that stick with you, where you have been in those moments where everyone's together, where it's not about you and your normal day-to-day problems or the normal things you're dealing with, which are personal to you, whether it's your job or your career or your life or your relationships or whatever it may be, but where we're all in it together. The times where the news, you're one of a community where everyone is anticipating the same thing, which we have felt recently on 9/11, or obviously during the hurricane. And now this, where it has even been, I mean, we thought that was kind of crazy, where I know we didn't get back to normal for 16 days. We had people staying with us because they didn't have power. We had a generator, so we had power, but we didn't have normal power in the house. We had limited from the generator, but dealing with that and seeing all those trucks and everything that was going on during that time period, obviously how the world stopped after 9/11 for a few days, and really it was whatever it was, 11, 12 days till we got back to a ball game. When we went to Shea Stadium for that brave Met game, that was the first one back. But this has taken on such a new quality to us on a day-to-day basis. And, every day is a new chapter. Every day seems to bring something else. And when I was out today, I had to run a couple errands. It really hit home how few people were out and about today. I mean, I went to deal with one of my brokers and on a financial issue, and there was hardly any traffic there, where there normally is a lot. And then going into stores, like I said, where there just was nobody there. And just things that you've taken for granted that are just, normal are just right now so different than they've been that we have rarely seen. And you didn't even know if it was capable, if we were capable of being shut down to the extent we're being shut down right now. And I'm sure some people are still haven't altered their lives very much. I mean, I'm sure they've altered them because there's not many places to go or do. I mean, there's not many things to do or go, places that you can even go out and do anything. Even if you were willing to do it or looking to do it, there's not that many places to go to do something. Not right now. And every day there's another, like we just heard about the Nets and Durant. And today at least we had something to talk about where we actually had some sports news, whether it's the players that the Jets and the Giants are quietly adding right now, or the big headlines with the quarterbacks, and led, of course, by Tom Brady, who is, awaiting a decision. He's made one decision, now he has to make another. Of course, if you're just joining us, Tom Brady has left the Pats, and we're waiting to see where his next destination is. I guess it is at least a possibility, although I think a very small one, that he could retire, but I don't think that's the case. I think it looks like he's either headed to the Bucks, which seems to be the favorite in the clubhouse, or the Chargers. Rivers has gone to the Colts. 1 year, $25 million, all guaranteed. Teddy Bridgewater has gone to Carolina, and Cam Newton leaves a unhappy man, now looking for a new deal, allowed to go out and make his own deal. And if not, you know what that means? They'll just jettison him. They'll just cut him loose, and he'll have to go out and make his own deal anyway. Breeze goes back to the Saints as expected. And you're waiting to see where the other shoe drops for for Tom. Obviously, if you're a Jet fan now, you don't have Tom Brady in your division for the first time in a very. Oh, you might. I guess you still possibly could if he surprised everybody and went to Miami, but I don't think that's the case. Despite the owner and he having the same alma mater, I do not think that's the case. I'd be surprised if it was, but I was surprised that he left the Pats because I really believed. You know, I've known Kraft since he bought the team because Bill was up there when Bill Parcells was up there when Kraft bought the team. Bill had been there a year before Kraft even bought it. When Orthwein still owned it, Bill took over. And then Kraft came aboard in what was Bill's second year as the owner. So I knew Kraft from the day he got there. So I've known him a very long time. And I think I know him fairly well. And I knew how he felt about Brady. So I always felt there would be the time where, despite what was going on with Brady and Belichick, that he would say to Tom, if I can make this work. Do you want to come back? And that's why he was quick to say Tom really didn't want to come back. Tom really wanted to be a free agent. I really think money was an issue here too. I think the Pats and Belichick put a worth on what they thought Brady was worth now, and they weren't going to go past it. I'm sure Brady found that somewhat insulting. But if he had really said, hey, I need you to work with me here, I think Kraft would have. I believe that because I know how Kraft feels about Brady. So that didn't happen. So I'm sure it was hard for Kraft to let Brady go. But Brady's now gone. And now we wait to see where he goes. And it doesn't sound like he's going home. I mean, if you're asking me, if I would have a vote, I'd vote that his next stop's Canton. Because to me, he's got nothing to prove and nothing to gain. And not a lot to lose, but you know what? The odds on him having a special experience where he's going is very, very small. He's not young. He's not the same player, despite what he thinks he is. He's not the same player. And he's going to go into something that is so different than what he's used to. He is a maniacal worker who is used to having everybody around him be so directed and so focused, laser focused on the objective, so prepared. He never walked on a field and didn't have incredible concentration from the players around him, and those players knew what they were looking at, knew the game plan, were prepared and focused and ready to go. And if you think that's the case everywhere, every day, you're out of your mind. It's not. But that's what he's been used to, and that's what he grew up with because that's the way it was there. So he was part of a very special culture, and he was an incredibly maniacal, hard worker, known to be Scott Pioli, who I was going to have on today, he just called me back now, but it's too late. I just saw he texted me now. Maybe I have him on tomorrow because I asked him to come on today, and he'd been doing shows, and he just texted me back now. He told me the story how, I remember he was with the Pats for years. He's Bill Parcells' son-in-law, married to his middle daughter, Dallas. And he went with Belichick and Mangini. Those guys, when they left the Browns, came to the Jets, and then when they left the Jets, they went to the Pats, and Pioli went with Mangini, with Belichick to the Pats when they left the Jets and Parcells when he didn't take the job. And he told me that he was driving in March one night. He left the building when he worked for the Pats, and he worked for the Pats for a long time. And he was very close to Tom. And he said he got to the bottom of the hill, and if you knew their complex there, he could see the lights on in the field house where they practice. And he was like, some kid left the lights on. And it was like, he said, a March night, and it was, like 9:30 on a Friday night. And he said he went in there to turn the lights off, and who was in there throwing the ball by himself? Brady. That was Brady. He worked. This guy came out as Dr. O'Brien, who you've heard with me many, many times. Doc used to do the physicals for all the quarterbacks at the draft. He said Brady was the worst bodied quarterback he had ever examined in the history of doing the draft for all the years he did it. And Doc was a quarterback himself. He said he was the worst bodied quarterback he'd ever seen. That's why he got drafted where he did. And he went up there and he built himself up and he got stronger and he learned how to throw the ball the right way and he polished up his throwing ability and he worked and he worked and he worked and he outworked everybody to become this legendary player. Yes, there was talent in there, no question. You can't become as good as he was without there being talent in there. But it had to do with this obsessive, maniacal ability to work and prepare, which never left him for a day and is basically the backbone, the hallmark, the foundation of everything he knows. And that will be very hard for him to find people like that anywhere else. That's why that's what Montana knew when Montana said, stay. The odds on finding that culture again, that level of toughness and smarts and direction and all the things that the Pats bring under Belichick's direction, the culture that he's created there and that Brady has existed in will be so hard to duplicate. He will probably be very unhappy with his next job. Even when it'll be with a guy who's, let's say it's with a very good offensive guy in Arians, who's a really good guy to hang around with, who's a terrific offensive coach. He's got a lot of people there. They'll put together a fun offense. It still won't be the same. They will not do it the way the Pats do it because nobody does it the way the Pats do it. And that maniacal, steadfast level of intensity and preparation and hard work that he brought to the table was rewarded every day by the people he played with and the culture he lived in and the coach who directed it. He's not going to find that again. And there's one other thing that I've heard time and again, which is so dumb, it's just off the charts. And I guess I have a better understanding of it because I was in a very successful team for 2 years, over 20 years with Mike and the Mad Dog. And when we broke up, people say, see, you knew they couldn't work together. Couldn't work together. We worked together for 20 years. They had to break up. Hey, sometimes things just run their course. It's not like something had to happen with Belichick and Brady. Nothing had to happen. It's just run its course. They were able to stay together and team and subjugate what they needed to both subjugate at times. Coexist when they both had to coexist at times. Whatever conflicts there were, they buried them. Whatever they needed to sacrifice, they sacrificed. And they were able to stay together and have that outrageous amount of success and be together for that many years. And at the end, one person wants change, and then it's, see, they couldn't work together. What are you talking about? They work together as perfectly as any team has ever worked together as coach and quarterback. No one's ever done it better or longer or more seamlessly. Have respect for that. Understand what that 20 years together and all that success means. Don't say, you see, they didn't last forever, so it doesn't work. That's the dumbest thing I ever heard. They were together longer than anybody could ever imagine a coach and quarterback being together. And they made it work every day. What they did will probably not be equaled. Rather than look at it and say, see, told you it wouldn't work. What do you mean it didn't work? It worked forever. Back after this. If you're the Jets and Giants, you have the ability to get 3 premium picks, unless you make a trade and add a couple of picks. Add your premium guys in the draft, and then you have the ability to go out and sign a couple of guys that you can spend a lot of money on. Okay? And the way I always look at it is you can probably say you have 6 premium moves to make. Both of them have enough money to be in that position where you can go out and really spend some money, really help your team, and then go out and get those guys, obviously, in the draft and at the premium positions. And remember that the draft is deep in offensive linemen, very deep, probably as deep a draft as we've seen, and is the deepest draft in wide receivers that there's ever been. I mean, you can get guys in this draft on the wide receiver level that will absolutely be in the 3rd round that will start next year. There's not even a question about that. I mean, there are so many guys. It is without question in those 2 areas. Corner, they say it's also deep there. I'm not as sure about the corner talent. I don't know the corner talent as well. I know that the wide receivers are unbelievable, and the offensive line is incredible. And there's really top of the draft offensive line talent here, and there's really game-breaking wide receiver talent here. But there's so much that if you take a wide receiver a little down a bit, you're still getting a lot of quality. There's also positions where, as you know, you are going to overpay dramatically. For edge pass rushers, you are going to pay a tremendous amount of money, and you're never going to get a lot for your buck because it's so hard to find anybody. You can't get them in the draft. There's a handful of them in the draft, if you're lucky. And in free agency, they're almost always locked up. They are almost absolutely always locked up. They never get free. So that is the hardest thing to go out and find, and it really is very difficult. So, I mean, it's something that you look at, unless you're looking for quarterbacks, and they obviously both aren't. So it puts them in, I figure most likely neither one's trading out of their spot. So they'll both be in a position. The Giants might be in a position to add a guy on the defensive line, or an edge guy, maybe. There's a good chance. I'd say they have a chance. Jets, no, in that regard. But the offensive line and the wide receiver spots are just loaded, and both should be able to do very well in the draft in those 2 areas, especially since they both need help on the offensive line without any question. But see to me, you have 3 and 3. You got 3 you're going to get in free agency, and you're going to have 3 in the premium rounds of the draft, and you got to come out of that with 6, especially where they're drafting, 6 legitimately solid pieces. And it's time for both those teams to move up dramatically. We'll talk more about it. We didn't get to them much today. We'll do a lot more on both those tomorrow, okay? Casamigos Tequila, as always, brings you the program brought to you by those who drink it. Steve Summers is next. We'll see you tomorrow.